This is writing, and this is writing. But when Thomas Edison recorded ideas for a transcriptionist to type, was he writing? Edison was using a new technology he had invented to dictate what would later be transcribed. But even at that time, the idea was not new. In the 17th century, having gone blind, Milton dictated the latter part of Paradise Lost to his daughters. Dostoevsky hired a transcriptionist in order to finish The Gambler on a tight deadline for his publisher. And Henry James turned to transcriptionists because of rheumatism of the wrist. In fact, libraries are filled with books by authors who have rarely, if ever, put pen to paper or fingers to keys, yet they are considered writers nonetheless. And what about reading? Aside from the fact that some works were never actually meant to be read, can listening to an audio version of a book be considered the same as reading it? Daniel T. Willingham, professor of psychology at the University of Virginia, was asked the question so frequently that he decided to write an article entitled "Listening to an Audio Version of a Book is Not Cheating." In it, he explains that once you are good at decoding letters into sound, which most of us are by the time we're in the 5th or 6th grade, the comprehension is the same whether it's spoken or written. Pam Varley, journalist and public policy case writer at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, writes, "Uncertain whether audiobooks belong to the respectable world of books or the more dubious world of entertainment, elementary and high school teachers have often cast a fishy eye at them, and many have opted for the safe course of avoidance. However, understanding the message, thinking critically about the content, using imagination, and making connections are all at the heart of what it means to be a reader, and why kids learn to love books. All of those skills can be practiced just as well by listening to a book as they can by reading it. A child's first contact with literature is being read to, perhaps even following along as they listen. Listening to books can also be used to introduce students to books above their reading level, to introduce new genres that students might not otherwise consider, and to provide a bridge to important topics of discussion for parents and children, perhaps when they can listen together while commuting to sporting events, music lessons, or on vacations. Language comprehension and production evolved in connection with hearing probably 150,000 years ago, and to some extent, those skills are hardwired. On the other hand, we've only been reading and writing for about 5 to 7,000 years, and for a majority of that time, those skills were only being practiced by a select few. More commonly, cultures around the world have a long oral tradition. This tradition is not limited to stories, but also includes teaching, culture, knowledge, and historical records. Most people tend not only to prefer narrative stories, but to remember them better as well. These are living stories, the way they have been passed along for countless generations. We are probably just as well suited to hearing stories as we are to reading them, and there are probably as many people who would prefer telling a good story to writing one. Some of the best writers are, after all, the best storytellers. Whether or not we believe that listening to a book is exactly the same as reading it, most of us would probably agree that audiobooks can take reading to places where it could not otherwise go, and enable people of all ages and reading levels to experience great works of literature for the pure enjoyment of them. And if technology can facilitate some writing tasks, not just for those with difficulties in writing, but for all students, wouldn't we be better off keeping an open mind about what reading and writing are and can be?